So I did, in a way, I formulated this short talk because it's just 15 minutes. I thought it would be good to make a homework and to read two texts, and I would like to comment or give you a very short review of these two texts, and then to compare these two texts within a research or within a field that I'm working on, and to create a kind of bridge or comparison. The first text is very general text introducing basic terminology related with the commons. It was written by an American architect and scholar in humanities. His name is Reinhold Martin, and it's called Public and Commons. I don't know if you got these links, but I will shortly tell you some arguments from the text. I like the idea also that the text is written by a practitioner in architecture, because this question of public and common appears a lot, of course, as a question for architects that are dealing with the spaces, with the urban physical spaces in the cities. And this question of public, actually not so much of commons, but it always appears under the name of public, that the commons are discussed in architecture, for example. So first he makes this distinction of two sets of concepts. On the one hand, there are terms like public realm, public sphere, public space, public sector, and the public itself. And on the second hand, there is another set of terms coined or linked with the idea of commons, the commons, common sense, commonwealth, common use, etc., etc. He starts with Hannah Arendt with the book The Human Conditions from 1958, and he reminds, there is the image coming from, that she comments on the fact on the beginning of the book. I tried to find actually the image directly from the book, but he says that it appears on the beginning of the book, but I didn't find it in the book from 1958. So I don't know if she's only talking about Sputnik from 1957, or if there is really a photography in the original book. At least in PDF I didn't find it. And he gives this example of Sputnik as an object that shows, that illustrates the mechanics of what she calls the sphere of oikos, housekeeping, that emerged from classical domestic sphere, and this is the sphere of managerial way of thinking or dealing with the reality, with the real, with the material, that kind of oppresses the current, as she says. This is the argument how he puts it. Then he goes further, and he speaks about Jürgen Habermas, about the book The Structural Transformation of the Public Sphere from 1962. And he reminds Habermas' definition or idea of the rise of the social, that Habermas kind of connects with the 19th century modernity. Here you can see two illustrations. One is the illustration of the society, bourgeois society, or kind of society, city bourgeois, that appreciate or enjoy actually one of the salons in Paris. On the right side, there is one of the famous Honoré Daumier caricatures of Connoisseur de l'Art. So he brings this these two illustrations could be brought as an example of this or the rise of the social that Habermas speaks about. And as it, of course, is very much visible, it's coined with one very concrete social class. Also gender-wise, there are only males or mainly males. But what is interesting also from today's point of view, that As we can remember, for example, from Diderot critiques, the critique of art started as a comment that people gathered in front of the doors of the salons, and they started to depict what they saw inside. And this is how critique d'art started in France, actually, before even the French Revolution. So these images show this momentum of rising the voice, critical voice on the public. Of course, he also reminds the critiques of this Habermas conception that it was really narrowing the public sphere on implicitly male, white, moneyed, or otherwise hegemonic subject that was the subject actually of this public realm. Then he continues further and brings us to the more actual questions of commons, of course, and he reminds, of course, the three books of Michael Hart and Antonio Negri, Empire, Multitude, and Commonwealth, and he tries to bring or to connect these two conceptions of Hannah Arendt of public and private, and in which extent the new notion of commons in Multitude and in later books appears. As he says, I will quote, to confront the latter, they propose a political philosophy that substitute older categories like the people, the state, or private and public with the new ones like multitude, commonwealth, singularity, and common. The common is not merely a post-industrial upgrade of the modern state, which is historically linked with the rise of industrial capitalism. Hart and Negri define this common most succinctly as natural environment on the one hand, and on the second hand, of course, the products of social interactions such as codes, languages, affects, informations, and other forms of knowledge. They connect the rise of commons with the models of bottom-up politics, of ultra-globalization movements, for example, or Zapatistas and other movements. Then he goes further, and he brings a critique, or a critique that was actually pointed to Hart and Negri, that went in Art Forum magazine. It was a text that appeared. I will tell you immediately. It appeared in. It was a text by David Harvey. That was titled Michael Hart, Antonio Negri, Commonwealth and Exchange, Art Forum 43. It was in 2009 and 2010, and it was an exchange around their ideas. Now I would like to switch to another text, because I'm sorry, it's very short time, and give you a very short resume of another text that is much less general, much more concrete, and then brings together two models or two concepts. First concept is from Cornelius Castoriadis, and it's a project of individual and collective autonomy, as he developed it in various texts. And I quote now, or I follow an argumentation from a text from Evangelos Papadimitriopoulos, and the article is called Socialism ou Barbarie, from Castoriadis' project of individual and collective autonomy to the collaborative commons. And the idea of this text is to bring actually the argumentation of Castoriadis related to his project of individual and collective autonomy, and compare it with the real events, real happenings in the field of collaborative commons. I quote, "Socialism signifies the self-institutionalization of society on the basis of a direct democracy that introduces a positive notion of freedom as the precondition of individual and collective autonomy." What Castoriadis did, what was the main critique to centralistic or bureaucratic communism, was that the main argument or the main point of Castoriadis' critique was that actually the workers are obliged to follow the orders of the managers, of the chief. They cannot take part in the planning of the factories, of what will be produced. And this moment Castoriadis takes as a kind of crucial point, and he tries to develop, to set up, to invent new forms, something that could be where all actors would be engaged also in a planning, in decision making, and where the hierarchical structure of the enterprise, even communistic, would be challenged and changed. And this is, of course, something that goes as transversal topic or transversal moment through not only Castoriadis' theoretical concept, but here in this text, Papadimitriopoulos compares it with the real models coming from collaborative commons and various types of collaborative economies. And it is something that I wanted actually to connect with a third example that I brought, and this example is from the psychiatrical field. And this is something that is much more close to somehow to my own research and to my own motivation in this topic, because as I told you on the beginning, after 12 years of running or programming and also managing an contemporary art organization, I, together with my colleague, we came to the moment that we felt that there is a certain illness that we felt going through the art system that engage us against our will in certain stereotypical mechanical procedures that we try to get rid of, and we decided to choose actually as a kind of emancipatory line or emancipatory motor, an example of this clinic. It's La Clinique de la Borde, a French psychiatrical hospital that you, of course, may know. And we started to study actually how the processes of the La Borde were launched and how this institution was established. The short history of the clinic is that there was another clinic that started to work under occupation in the 1940s. It was a clinic in Saint Alban, and where you will speak about it maybe, or a little bit? No. Okay, so our really approach, or kind of, it's very short time to speak about it, but our motivation, our desire was to approach very pragmatically this model as use it for the purpose of an art institution, so to say, if it's possible to translate, to make a kind of comparative study, because we speak a lot about, for example, here I would say the hierarchy is very nice. It's horizontal, we can all speak, there is no director. But then we come back to work and we again under these hierarchical structures that are museums actually. And this is interesting, that this bureaucracy, this power, this hierarchy we speak how to get rid of it, but in the same time we are engaged in it. So one of these learnings from these two texts, and maybe mainly from the experience of the lab, is how to establish actually this non-hierarchical organization inside the institution. And one of the, of course, the lab, they systematically work on it. They didn't do it from the scratch. They did what they called institution of the year #1. So they first, in the clinic started, they started a direct democracy processes. They started to write a constitution. They improved this constitution through the times, through the years. And then, of course, they discussed the division of the labor, salaries, circulation, for example, of functions inside the collective. So, the people were not binded with their own functionalities. For certain periods of time, they were circulating through the institution and doing different various kind of jobs. Also, it was related with the salaries that were discussed on common meetings, etc. So, I think this institution, as it's known, it can serve as a brilliant example of the practical, pragmatical processes that one can think about also to start inside cultural organization, cultural institutions. I can maybe show you as very small example. We are actually in a short, I would say that we slowly started these processes in our very small organization, and one of the results is a blog that we started, and it's called Institutional Diary. So we started, I think, a couple months ago, and the point is that we all write actually a diary of an institution. I hope that
2 minutes.
Sorry?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. I cut it as I could. I hope I will find it. No. And actually, this blog, what is interesting that this is not it. Sorry. I had it in the other computer, but the point is that we actually write, all employees have access to this blog, and they are blogging actually about all issues. It's kind of semi-public. We don't advertise it as a kind of output, but what is interesting that it's a kind of blend of very personal, very subjective notes on the organization that is kind of mixed up with official statements, with minutes from the meeting. So we try to kind of publicly, without any control, censorship, or only what functions is self-control. There is no editing of this blog. So we try to kind of slowly approach by small steps this idea of an organization that is, so to say, self-managed or based on certain principles of direct democracy. And I hope that it can serve as an example. And this is also my question, why these commons, how to approach them, from which perspective. I did it from on the one hand, very general and very, very concrete. And I'm curious what you will say or how you will approach it. Thank you.